Oh, good morning. The slight disaster there, a bit of a fumble bum as usual, and I managed to knock everything out of kilter just before we went on the air. There, that's a bit better. And good morning. Welcome to Mirador Television. Usual cock-ups. We specialise in that, and we're going to take you through what is known now as FThe Jamboree, where everybody is invited in and everybody has their say. But first of all, we'll do the news headlines, of course. We always do. And we'll try and no, we're having no luck whatsoever. Oh, hang on. Yes, we are. No, we're not. Yes, we are. I came across a little promo that I'd forgotten that we got, and I thought I would play it. Well, that's a huge success. Didn't come through. No. I obviously am not linking it up. Well. Is that's what we have to say for the moment. There we go. I'm back. Much as you want me, I'm sure. But we are going to invite various people, but let's take a look at the news headlines first. The papers. The faltering election start and general ejection, the generic thing. So let's go to each individual paper. The Metro, Rishi's bumpy takeoff. If the Metro is saying that, I mean, it's never very kind to the government because it's London-based. But if it's been that unkind, one wonders how Rishi has put his foot in it. So let's take a look. Rishi Sunak features on the front of the Metro as the first day of general election campaigning kicks off. The Prime Minister visited Ilkeston in Derbyshire, where he held a question and answer with staff at a warehouse as part of a 2-day tour of the UK's nations. The headlines read, Rishi's bumpy takeoff. As it reports, Mr. Sunak admitted there would be no migrant flights to Rwanda before polling day. Elsewhere, Hollywood actor Tom Holland swapped a Spider-Man suit for a tank top for his latest role in West End play Romeo and Juliet. Tom's a Marvel man, the paper writes. Oh, well, it's got a fan. The Financial Times. Sunak makes a faltering election start after Rwanda and smoking setbacks. Not impressing is our Rishi. On the front of the Financial Times, Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer and his deputy Angela Rayner smile as they campaign in Gillingham, promising to end the Tory chaos of the past 14 years. The broadsheet leads on Mr. Sunak admitting he could not deliver his flagship Rwanda policy before the 4th of July, Independence Day, by the way, in the States. Good old Tom Paine, as well as his phased smoking ban. It describes it as a series of setbacks and an awkward first day on the campaign trail for the Prime Minister. Well, at least he can only get better. The Daily Express, right, which is broadly always government supported. Rishi lashes out. Starmer hasn't the courage to face me on television, he says. Rishi lashes out. Starmer hasn't the courage to face me on television. It's the Daily Express's headline, as it reports on Mr. Sunak challenging Sir Keir to a TV debate every single week until election day. Tory chairman Richard Holden tells the paper the Labour leader is spineless and is chickening out of debates he promises to do. Also on the front page is bubbly Leah Harrison, aged 10, who was killed on a school trip in North Yorkshire. Oh dear, that is sad. That should be the headline, really. The Eye. Smoking ban dropped. A snap election also stops help for renters. Sounds to me as if Rishi has acted in haste and is going to repent in leisure. The Eye notes legislation for compensation for victims of the infected blood scandal is still on track. Elsewhere, it writes, allies of media tycoon Rupert Murdoch are urging him to stop his outlets backing Labour. Dear. The Guardian. Sunak begins election campaign by abandoning flagship policies. The Guardian pictures the Prime Minister stepping off a plane in Scotland at Inverness Airport. Sunak begins election campaign by abandoning flagship policies, it headlines. It also reports ex-Post Office boss Paula Venables blocked a review that could have exposed the Horizon scandal more than 10 years ago. But Ms. Venables insists she was not part of a cover-up. Beyonce in cowboy hat is pictured as the paper sets out to answer why country music is the big pop craze of 2024. Well, why is it? I quite like some country and western. Some. The Mirror. Election, a bad start for Sunak. Brewers, oops. The PM's FThe blunder during Wales' beer visit forced to backtrack on NHS and Rwanda pledges. Q&A worker reveals as Tory. Good day for Labour. Let's get a bit of detail on that. The Daily Mirror writes, the election has got off to a bad start for the Prime Minister, with blunders, admissions of failure, and Tory attacks. It highlights an awkward moment when Mr. Sunak, chatting to staff at a Welsh brewery, mentioned Euro 2024, despite Wales not qualifying. Elsewhere, footballers Aaron Ramsdale, Conor Gallagher, and Marcus Rashford look dapper in new official clothing the team will be wearing off the pitch. But as the paper noted, Rashford did not make the squad. And BBC Radio 1 presenter and ex-Saturday singer Molly King features as the tabloid reports she found strength after losing her dad and giving birth. Now, which one took her strength? Daily Mail. Tories to cut green levies on fuel bills. The energy price cap is set to plunge by over £100 before the election, and Minister pledges to curb eco taxes on families. The Daily Mail also pictures Leah calling her death a tragedy and noting she had just finished her exams. The paper's lead focuses on the Conservatives pledging to cut green levies on fuel bills. Also featured is an account of a parent snorting drug ketamine at their teenage daughter's party. It didn't go well, they say. I should think not. Kids want to look up to parents. The Times. Energy bills tumble in the first big election battle. On the front of the Times, Mr. Sunak is seen laughing as he is presented with an umbrella by MP Maggie Throop after his rather wet Downing Street election announcement. Leading on energy bills, the paper says the Conservatives will seek to use net zero policies to distinguish themselves from Labour, accusing Mr. Starmer's party of failing to be honest about the costs its enormous environmental pledges will place on households. The paper also notes the first millennial saint after a 15-year-old who died from leukemia in 2006 or 2006 had a second miracle attributed to him, approved by the Pope. Well, there you go. Miracles are not dead. And the Daily Star. We can't avoid the Daily Star. Holiday bookings are up 57% as we all flee the bull and baloney of July the 4th election. And it shows pot-bellied men lying on a beach, passing a beer bottle. The general ejection, it says. The general ejection is the headline on the front of the Daily Star. It reports holiday bookings are up 57% as people try to avoid 6 weeks of fibs and bluster in the run-up to the election. Well. Fancy that. Better take a look at the weather. Need something good. Today, it's going to... today, full sunshine all day. Well, not quite all day. At 10 o'clock, we're going to get a little bit of cloud. But it's the only thing between 10 and 2. It's going to cloud over 10 to 2. The rest of the day, we've got brilliant sunshine. And that's brilliant. And zero chance of rain. Zero chance of rain. So there you go. At least there is some good news. Good news in the offing. Ha ha ha. Ha ha ha. Wow, it's already 17 minutes past 8. And we'll take a look at a little deeper look, I think, shall we? In the papers, we've got time. Oops. There we go. Well, the Express says Prince Harry blindsided King Charles as major snub reveals deeper-rooted problems. Oh dear. Meghan Markle and Prince Harry constantly at war as core reason for royal split revealed. Princess Kate's friends reveal when she'll really return to duties after confusion erupted. And Prince Harry and Meghan Markle invited on another unofficial royal tour after the success of the Nigerian one, I suppose. Spineless Keir Starmer lacks courage to take on Rishi Sunak in TV debates. That's what Richard Holden, the Tory chairman, says. Princess Kate's flattering Clarins lip balm is now on sale at John Lewis. Ooh. Beautiful European country named the best place in the world to live as a British expat. Don't know which one that is. Oh, lovely. Thanks. Ada. Angela Rayner, Council House scandal to be settled as general election looms. Death in Paradise, actor Don Warrington's family. The tragedy and a soap star wife as he turns 73. And people on benefits going to Spain, Turkey, or France this summer issued a DWP warning. Oh dear. You spend public money going away on holiday, you're in trouble. Well, that's a potted view. A potted view of the news. It's all a bit electoral, I think. For us, we don't do that sort of in-depth stuff. We will be trying to get the candidates once it's clear who they are locally, and so that you can listen to them. But for the moment, I think that what we'll do is we will invite some people on, won't we? We will. And Friday on Mirador is normally a very, very spirited day. Now, I'm issuing general invitations, so who knows who's going to crop up today. Oh, thank you, darling. Who knows who's going to crop up today? Now, we've got the Times here. Energy bills tumble in the first big election battle. Hard times blame for abortions at record high. Oh dear. Now, this is an interesting story. The first millennium saint will be London-born teenager Carlo. The PlayStation fan who was devoted to the church and helped the poor is to be canonized. Less than 35 years after he was born and baptized in London in 1991, a teenage boy is set to become the Catholic Church's first millennial saint. Pope Francis has canonized hundreds of medieval martyrs, Mother Teresa and Pope John Paul II, but will now bestow the honor on a much more modern miracle worker, Carlo Acutis, a boy who loved playing on his PlayStation and died from leukemia at age 15 in 2006. The Pope decreed yesterday that he had approved a second posthumous miracle attributed to Carlo, qualifying the teenager for canonization. The Vatican has declared that two people, a Brazilian boy and a Costa Rican woman, owe their lives to miraculous recoveries that took place after their families prayed to Carlo for healing. Of 912 people canonized by Francis, the most recent birth date was 1926. Okay, bye. Bye now. See you Monday. Okay, bye. Bye now. Right. Well, there you go. There you go. It is. It's easy to sneer at these things, but the fact of the matter is, whether we like it or not, is the church as such, and let's forget Islam for a moment. Yes, Islam is important. Don't get all hot under the collar if you're a Muslim. Islam is important, but yes, the Christian church is also important. It is still the religion of our society. And as such, it can be inspirational. I will tell you this, I don't go to church as often as I did now, simply because I'm, to put it bluntly, I'm a cripple. So getting there on a Sunday can be a bit difficult. And once I'm there, it's even moving about church can be difficult. But I do go. And if nothing else, I get inspiration from the beauty of a church. I spend an hour surrounded by beautiful stained glass windows, which by anybody's assessment are beautifully made and very skillfully made. I'm surrounded by beautiful ornaments, beautifully made, skillfully made. I sit in architecture, which in the main is over 1,000 years old. I sing songs that are sometimes 600 or 700 years old. I listen to good, solid music. And if you're going to say, hey, an old fogey like you, well, to some extent. But I tell you, just before I started this program, for inspiration, I listened to Steve Harley. Now, there is a modern musician that appeals to matrons and old men like me, as well as youngsters. It holds concerts in the Albert Hall and fills them. Is Come Up and See Me, Make Me Smile. It's a classic. Wherever he performed that, he died about 1.5 years ago. A very, very talented musician. Very talented indeed. Now, I don't listen to him in church. But I have fairly Catholic takes with a little c. As a matter of fact, I do go to the Catholic Church now and again because they have a choir that only sings about once every 3 weeks. But it is excellent. And it also is born of people who get a scholarship for singing in it. So it does some good. All the way around, it's integrated. Why did I get on this? Well, religion is important. The Sussex Express. Camilla, I'd love to go to Hogwarts. I'll hop on the Express and sit in that wonderful hall. Queen Camilla shared some of her favorite children's stories with local pupils after being revealed as a surprise guest at the opening day of the Charleston Festival. Well, we are not at all very happy with Charleston. We don't think that it's very democratic or down to earth. So, Camilla, you've lost a point or two after having won back a certain amount of respect. Yes, the Charleston Festival is important, but it's also elitist. And that festivals can do without. And believe me, I'm not somebody who is envious of the rich and the famous. Quietly, I will confess to you that up until about 1 year ago, when I could no longer go to London, I rub shoulders 2 or 3 times a week with the very, very powerful. So if you want to accuse me of envy, no. But I do think, and in the spirit of Tom Paine, spending lots of money for the taste of a few is something better left in the corridors of power where they can mull over. Now, here is Lawrence Smith. You're doing a report which I think is well worthwhile. in the Sussex Express. Sussex is guaranteed to get at least 4 new MPs after voters go to the polls in the upcoming general election, and some parliamentary constituencies will be contested for the first time after key boundary changes were made in East and Mid Sussex, in a bid to even out the number of people represented by each MP. After months of speculation, the date for the general election is now set for Thursday, July the 4th, Independence Day. A new seat of East Grinstead and Uckfield has been created by the Boundary Commission to combine parts of the Wealdon constituency as well as parts of Lewes, Mid Sussex, and Horsham. It includes East Grinstead and Uckfield, with the boundary going around the edge of Haywards Heath. I won't read out the candidates. You'll find out soon enough. Wealdon will disappear, and in its place will be Sussex Weald. It'll include Bexhill, parts of Bexhill and Battle, including Heathfield. Maria Caulfield is going to defend one of the smallest majorities in the country. The Liberal Democrats are going to target it, already have. James McCleary is their candidate here. But this is the sort of thing that is really annoys me. Don't do it, James. Don't do it. Be positive, right? This election is a once in a generation chance to kick the Conservatives out of power. The Conservatives aren't all bad and all good, any more than the Lib Dems or Labour are all good or all bad. Get on with actually doing positive things and not negative things. I am fed up of hearing negative things. And James, if you're going to follow that, then I'm afraid that you lost my sympathy. You're a nice young man. You don't have to be nice necessarily on the hustings, I understand that. But don't kick the Conservatives out. What is a Conservative? If you ask somebody in the street what a Conservative is, they wouldn't know. And particularly those who are particularly vocal about the damn Tories. I am sick and tired of listening to politicians yell and scream at one another. Oh, yell and scream by all means, but in a constructive and positive way, and not the damn Tories, or the damn Lib Dems, or the damn communists for that matter. I am fed up. Okay, you're disappointed in seeing what the Tories have done. What are you going to do in its place? What are you going to do in its place? Caroline Lucas isn't going to stand in Brighton Pavilion for the Greens. Well, there we go. There we go. Ho, 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 ho. Voluntary organisations and community groups in the Lewis district are being invited by the council to bid for community grants of up to £10,000. I can see Mirador getting it, the way that we have a go at all the councils. What qualification do you have? We criticise you. That's our job. But you won't stand for that. Far too sensitive. Far too thin-skinned. That's the problem. Far too thin-skinned. They don't understand the makeup of communities. Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. Well, there are some good stories in the Sussex Express. I want to see this paper come back in real strength. We don't have enough. Sure, they're opposition to us. Sure, they would be competing. But in a healthy and respectable way, so that we can provide a useful service to the community. That's what it's all about. Let's even Mick Symes and his Lewis blogs, if you like, on Facebook should be given the proper respect. They should be given the proper respect. Media isn't, it's all the fault of the media. It's all the fault of the media. Get off the pot. Let's stop denigrating people. Let us embrace the fact that we are a free society and want to stay that way, because believe me, there are enough entities trying hard to erode that freedom. Perhaps ad nauseum, I invoke the spirit of Tom Paine. Too frequently, but freedom of media is equated to freedom of thought, freedom of voice, freedom to express an opinion. And we, above all, believe in that in Mirador. You've only got to listen to some of the things that we say. And we're not disrespectful, except where disrespect is called for. But we do call it the way that we see it. And even Liza Page's alternative view, where for a long time she cried in the wilderness and is now beginning to find some people agree with her, particularly when it comes to the World Health Organization and the World Economic Forum. We express our views. And that's what a free media should be all about. The trouble is, I can remember when I was about 12 or 13 in a church group, we would emulate, we would copy our adults slavishly. It's crazy for young children to do that. But nonetheless, we did it because that was the norm. And we do so much in the norm now. What would we expected to do? Not what should we be doing. But we don't shake ourselves down. We don't get to grips with things and say, what should we be doing, not what are we doing? We are very, very keen to be critical. Tolerance seems to have disappeared from our society. And it's about time that we started to do something. We've reached probably about rock bottom with our politicians. I don't care which party you're talking about and at which level. They're pretty useless, all in all. And the more that they actually spout, and particularly when it becomes venomous, the more we realize their weaknesses and don't see any evidence of their strengths. That's where I've just had a go at James McCleary. I'm not saying don't vote for him. He's a nice young man. I'm not recommending that you vote for anybody. But all I'm saying is that no local politician has exactly set us alight. None has been very innovative. None, well, let's say it. None has stirred the blood the way that Norman Baker did. He understood what being a constituency MP was all about, and a very good one. John Henty and I were broadcasting yesterday when he walked past the window. He didn't look in, unfortunately, otherwise, although he did look as if he was in a hurry. But it doesn't matter what party he was. He was a good constituency MP. And one of the only two honest politicians I've known ever in my life. And that's been a long life, and a good many politicians have gone under the bridge, and in a good many countries as well. We were lucky. I doubt we'll be that lucky again. Well, Well, that's my rant for the morning. Let's see if so any of my colleagues will come along in the next 10 minutes or so and begin to rant with me. It would be very good if they do. Very good. Let me let me. You know, the Sussex Express has been a laugh paper for God knows how long, but it is James is stepping down as Lib Dem leader so that he can concentrate on his campaigning for the big prize of MP. But you know, this I don't know who the editor is. I'd like to meet him. As a matter of fact, I think that we are all culpable in the media. We have no organization here to meet and to discuss and to take our profession further forward at a time when it's in decline. I don't know who the editor is. Okay, I could have made more effort to find out. But it would be nice that the leaders of our local media were public figures. It would be nice to think that we respect one another. And I have to say that looking at today's edition of the Sussex Express is my, particularly having been a victim of it a few years ago, of very, very poor reporting. It hit rock bottom then. It is starting to once again do things, report things of worth. It had a wonderful local reporter, a character, esoteric in the extreme. John Eccles was the last of the great local reporters. He was at everything. He knew everything. He did a little column which dug up old stories and old customs. If only we could get him replaced, I would feel happier, and so would the readership and the electorate. Yes, you've improved this paper, Mr. Editor. I'm trying to look to see where it might tell us that who you are. And just a very quick one. I'm going to take this home with me, and I am going to actually read carefully. I'm guilty of having discounted because it was in such a bad state, have discounted the local paper. But in fact, what I should have been doing, mea culpa, I should have been helping to boost it. I should be helping to boost this paper, to help give it more credibility, more support. In fact, I shall. And it's important. We can have our differences, but the great days of Fleet Street saw the big papers and the great reporters cooperating. Sure, there's competitiveness. Absolutely. In fact, I wouldn't mind giving the local paper a 10-minute slot. Now, there's a thought. We'll consider that. If they're interested. But looking at this paper, there's a new vitality to it. There's a new dimension. And that's encouraging. That's to be welcomed. Right, where are we? What's the time? 4:54. 8:54. 5 to 9. And this is normally when we get cracking. So I hope that we've got some people to get cracking with, because it's people that make this station. We don't have, we do have some video. We do have some moving picture programs. And in fact, I plan to improve that situation. But you know, the funny thing is, you can say you can set up without cost. You can't. Everywhere you turn, something costs. You have to put your hand in your pocket somewhere. My pockets aren't that deep. But we are forging a very credible news and comment service. And we would urge you to urge your friends to tap in. Oh, it's 3 hours worth. You don't want to listen to 3 hours worth, or listen to 10 minutes worth. But a little dip here and a little dip there doesn't do any harm. And of course, with social media, it's recorded anyway, so you can watch it after the fact. It's a beautiful day outside, by the way. Now, clear sky, blue sky. Well, there's a little puff of cloud. That's all. Just a little puff of cloud. But at least we are seeing the entrance of summer, which we should do. June is busting out all over. I don't know when summer officially starts, but I think that to some extent it's here. The English summer, anyway. It's crept up on us. But also, we are entering next week the 6th month of the year. We are halfway through 2024. And I can't say that we have made a great impact. Okay, so June the 4th, we got a fresh election. The chances are we're going to have a change of government. Well, we'll have a change of government, all right. What sort of government? I have no idea. I think politics, to some extent, although the bedrock is Parliament, is beginning to change. I think we are entering a new era. However, the one thing I would urge is that we don't actually forget the context of our democracy. Let us not throw the baby out with the bathwater. Let us make sure that we hold dear to some of the principles. People will laugh, but I always think in terms of being British as play up, and play the game. Oh, yes, okay. So it was a veneer. We've always been persuaded that we are decent, honest, jolly chaps, when in fact we are no more human, less human than the next guy. Of course, we suffer things like jealousy and envy. And here is the voice of common sense himself, Harry Atherton. Good morning, Harry Atherton.
Not sure about common sense, but anyway, common maybe common. Yeah.
Well, Tom Paine's early books, it was called, I think, Of Common Sense, was it not?
Well, it's a quality quite lacking, I think, these days. Common sense, practical common sense. People are driven or drawn to ideologies which don't seem to make any sense. I mean, sex, the sex of human beings, climate change, all sorts of things, which are total aberrations. But anyway,
yes, you're absolutely right. Is all the more reason, perhaps, why we should have Harry Atherton, the voice of common sense.
That's very kind of you, but I'm sure there are lots of people who wouldn't agree with me. I think I'm probably a little bit of a reactionary in the sense that when somebody believes in something so strongly that you can't debate with them, it's rather worrying. It becomes a religion, and
right.
common sense goes out of the window. And it's amazing how many very, very clever people, brighter people by far than myself, have climbed on different bandwagons and have given themselves, surrendered themselves to beliefs which just don't make any sense. The common sense factor, therefore, is totally lacking in the makeup of their decision-making process. Yeah.
Yes, I mean, indeed, I mean, the thing is that no thinking is done about this. It becomes rote. This is the way you do things, and nothing more is worse than civil servants.
Well, it's true, true, yeah. And of course, the constant enacting of new laws. New laws run into the hundreds and occasionally into the thousands per month. There are 1,000 new laws or when I say laws, they're not necessarily laws in the grand sense of the word, but rules of behavior,
Yes,
conditions.
conditions.
I mean, we've just in France, for instance, out of the blue, no warning of this whatsoever, all our bottle tops, silly little thing, bottle tops, whether it's on a milk bottle or a bottle of sauce or you name it, have now got to be attached to the plastic that rings their
Yeah.
base, so that you cannot take the top off. It remains permanently. You can unscrew it, the base unscrews, and then you peel it back, and then trying to put it back on again is you need a degree in mechanical engineering to put it back on again. But it's a new rule.
I did that this morning, Harry. Yes, you're absolutely right. And it's very frustrating because when you can't remove it and you try to pour stuff out, it catches in the top and goes all over the place.
It goes all over your pants. I mean, so that's a new rule, and I mean that is a rule. Somebody has passed that rule, and I won't call it a new law, but it's maybe part of a new act of some sort. I don't quite know why. I suppose there was a problem that people were finding stray bottle tops all over the place, and therefore it became an ecological factor. These ecologists, these wizards, at it again. The nutcases. Anyway.
Now, what's your reaction, Harry, to the choice of July the 4th for an election, Independence Day?
Well, I think that's interesting. Independence Day, is 4th of July. Interestingly enough, it was my wedding anniversary, the 4th of July. That's when I lost my independence. Well, anyway, that's just a personal problem. We all lose our independence when we get married, but there you go. So no, I think it's pure chance, really. I don't think it was a symbolic choice. The decision to go for this election earlier rather than later, I think, is probably a wise decision on the part of the Conservatives. If it's a personal decision by Rishi Sunak, that's so much the better for him, because it will not give a great deal of time for the socialists to get their act together. At the moment, nobody has a clue what their program is going to be. There's a suspicion that it will be built around even higher taxes, which is a traditional game plan of socialist government. But they haven't declared. They've made a list of 6 priorities, but there's no real program and no indication of how they would fund it. So nobody really knows what they stand for. Their basic argument so far in the uncertainty of the run-up towards an election date has been simply the fact that they're not conservatives, that they're a change, and anything but the Conservatives, which is a reasonable argument because the Conservatives have totally screwed it up. Well, the Parliamentary Conservative Party are not Conservatives. They're some, I don't know what they are, these One Nation Tories. I mean, half of them are ready to defect to Labour, I'm told, and useless bunch in Parliament now, apart from half a dozen individuals, maybe, who can be named. I mean, the real Conservatives in Parliament. You've got to look pretty hard to find them. The poor people in the constituencies must be tearing their hair out that they supported these people, got them elected, and then they start to do immediately something totally opposite of what they were hoping they would do. So the sooner they get horsed out, and that's the basic argument, you see, for the Socialist Party. We've got to get rid of this mob, and that's what will win them the election. And it'll win them the election quite clearly, if the polls are correct, by a landslide. But the Socialists haven't got a program. There's nothing. Can you mention any particular thing that they're going to do, that they've said they'll do this? And
no. In fact, I went through the 6 points, and I demolished 5 of them, within 5 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if I can demolish 5 of them in 5 minutes, then it just shows that they have absolutely no strength whatsoever. And to be
Absolutely.
quite honest with you, I can't remember the 6th
Mm-hmm.
that I thought had some merit. I fear that we are in for a period of very weak government for a little while, and it's rather a tragedy, because the world is indeed a very dangerous place right now.
Well, politics, the life of a government, 5 years, is in political terms is only a few seconds, a few minutes. It's a very short period of time. It's very difficult to. A government is like a giant ship. I'm told that it takes when the captain of an aircraft carrier wants to change course and go back the way he came. From the time he gives the order to the time the ship can turn and go back in the opposite direction, it has proceeded 5 miles.
Yes.
At least you could do it. Now, I don't know whether that's right, but the theory is such that the government procedure works so slowly that to get a policy defined, costed, approved, and get it through and activated in 5 years is a very short period of time.
Yes. You were PR for Air Canada. Did you ever go to their training headquarters and try to fly a 747?
I flew. No, I never tried to fly one, but I did write some stories at one stage about pilot training. So I've been on the flight deck of a training unit at the headquarters, and it's quite amazing because when they put you through turbulence, you really feel as if you're in the air.
As if you're in it, yes.
Yeah.
But I flew one at Cranebank, which is the British Airways training headquarters, and managed to land it on the roof of Terminal 3. Exactly what you just described is true. You put your foot down on the left-hand side of the rudder, and you realize that you're beginning to veer, and you put your foot on the right, and nothing happens. You continue to go like that before the thing kicks in. Is your likening of government to that is absolutely what a good likeness comparison.
Well, the point I was leading up to is that 5 years seems like a long time to you and me, but in government terms, it's relatively short. And a government to effectively see through its policies needs a couple of terms, which is 10 years. But what I see happening here is, yes, a landslide victory for the socialists. They've got an indescribably weak front bench. I don't think Starmer has much ideas. Really, much idea is not a very creative character, and so I think they'll really make a mess of it. And the game plan of probably the smartest person in British politics, Nigel Farage, and his game plan is that he's waiting for that to happen. If he just throw his hat into the ring now, Reform will not win any seats, or maybe the odd one. I doubt if they'll win any seats at all. And so there's little point in him doing it now. He's tried so many times to become a member of Parliament, but when the socialists have made a mess of things over the next 5 years, there'll be an open opportunity for a true party of the right to come into being. And either he'll go back and captain the reform movement, or he'll start his own new party, or my guess is he'll probably throw his hat in the ring and become elected head of the Conservative Party, what's left of it. Because what's left of the Conservative Party, once they got rid of these First Nation conservatives and all these left-wing conservatives, will concentrate to the right of the political spectrum, and he would throw his hat in the ring to head that operation. Probably try and combine with Reform and any other like-minded thinkers and come back in force. And you'll have exactly the same dynamic. It will be anybody but the socialists. At the moment, it's going to be anybody but the conservatives. And so, but the socialists can't put Britain back on track in 5 years. And in fact, to a degree, have things slipped so badly in Britain that any sort of a miracle, could the nation be put back on track?
Yes,
Is Britain anymore? When you've got
well, indeed, I think that is a completely valid question, and I think it's interesting that Farage has put up with the sneers, from the liberal conservatives. Huh, Nigel Farage. I actually have met Farage briefly twice. And I say to people, well, have you ever met the man? No. But they'd sneer at him and
these are left wing. These are the left wing pinko Tories. But the basic core of those who still hold what you would say was a Tory belief in the Disraeli sense, they would welcome Farage back with open arms. Farage was a Tory until 1992, I believe. He resigned because he disagreed with the Maastricht Treaty, which subordinated Britain to all of these Europeans who detest Britain. I mean, good God, it's a good thing we got out of that hornet's nest that Brexit was. But the only problem is they haven't exploited Brexit was still governed by 3,500 European laws. They should have been chased right off the order book right away. But anyway, so there'd be a hardcore to the right of the Conservative Party, the rump that I think will remain. I'm talking like people like Suella Braverman and oh gosh, some of the names.
Yes.
Rees-Mogg, yes, others like that, Wallace. They'd welcome him back with open arms, and he is. And the first duty of a politician is to get elected, and he's the most saleable political commodity on the shelves at the moment.
Yes.
If he were to actually throw his hat in the ring now, it wouldn't do him any good. He wouldn't get anywhere himself, but it would be a total wipeout for the Conservative Party. Remember, I don't know whether you were still in Canada. I had left by this time myself, Canada, come back to Europe. But the Tory party, which is a very powerful party in Canada, was reduced to 2 seats.
Yes,
2 seats.
I left, but I still follow to some extent Canadian politics with interest, and I remember that very clearly. Yeah.
So you can see that the wipeout is quite feasible. And had Farage joined Reform at this particular point, it would have literally been a wipeout. My guess is probably the public are beginning to see through that Starmer is a shell, and that the socialists don't have any real program. So it won't be quite the wipeout that was forecast a month or two ago. Probably lose about somewhere between 35 and 65 seats, as far as I can see it. But the Liberals will pick up a few because the wishy-washy party, the Liberals, so Starmer will come out ahead. But not perhaps with a huge majority as huge a majority as was forecast. And it depends how the 6-week campaign is going to be fought. If the Conservatives, even at this late stage, came out with some true conservative policies, then on issues like immigration and really putting a brake on this stupid net zero objective, which is going to destroy the economics of the nation, and to no avail, because Britain hardly produces any CO2. And when you consider the volume being produced by other countries in the world, and we're going to destroy our economies simply to be holier than thou. Now, if the Conservatives have got the guts to, they can't stop it. That would be too much of a brutal act. But if they can certainly put it back and try to undo the damage done by that awful woman Theresa May, locking Britain into net zero by 2050. Can you imagine? With no plan to do it and no cost. No cost.
Just a principle. Harry, is it your view still that that the swing to the right in the rest of Europe is continuing apace?
Oh, very much so. I mean, we've seen in the Low Countries in Holland, the Geert Wilders has who's quite extreme right by comparisons with anybody else, I would think. He has finally managed to cobble together a coalition. Their political structure in Holland is such that it's very difficult to get a majority party, the way the constituencies are established. But he's cobbled together a coalition, and so he's going into power. You already have a nominally right-wing government in Italy with Meloni, and she's right-wing. She's moved a little bit more to the center to make her policies more acceptable, palatable to the masses of the Italians, but she's right-wing. You've certainly got a right-wing government looming in France. The polls at the moment show that if Marine Le Pen were to run against the most promising Renaissance candidate, that Renaissance is the party of Macron, she would still win 51-49, and any other potential adversaries should win something like 55 to 45%. So we're certainly heading, if she keeps on that track, we're certainly heading for a right-wing government in France next time around. The presidential elections in France are in 3 years' time. So we've got 3 more years of Macron to put up with. And then, of course, if you take Europe itself, the major party in Europe risks becoming, or the major grouping of parties risks becoming right-wing, voting bloc. France is the leader of the team for France, a guy called Jordan Bardella, is running at 30%, as opposed to his closest rival is probably at 18%. So the French contingent, it looks like it's going to be pretty much right-wing. The AFD in Germany they're forging ahead, the right-wing party in Germany. And when we talk about right-wing parties, we're not talking about extreme right, that the socialists quite tell them it's extreme right. No, they're just right-wing parties with conservative principles. And in fact, to a degree, Marine Le Pen has swung to a more centrist position, but to the French, she's considered right-wing because it is basically a left-wing country. It's a country that's still scarred by its revolution, still lives by left-wing revolutionary principles. Most countries do have a center point where you've got right and left, and that center point varies according to the country. The middle of politics in the United States is very much to the right. The middle of politics in France is very much to the left. So anybody either side is categorized somewhat unfairly. You'll get Democrats in the United States who are very right-wing because that central point is biased towards the right. But anyway, that's a different debate. So yes, in answer to your question, I've given you a little bit of a long-winded answer, but I do believe that there is a definite swing to the right.
Yes.
Interesting contrast. Of course, there is the fact that we're going to have a swing to the left in Britain, but I think that's purely a reaction against the incompetence of the uh, parliamentary Conservative Party, not the Conservative Party, a fine organisation, but the parliamentary Conservative Party. I mean, the internecine nature of their conduct. I mean, the second they chased Boris Johnson out, they signed their own death warrant. Not that I'm a big Boris Johnson fan, but when they start killing off their own,
Yes.
they've never got. And they had the Liz Truss episode. So from the second they ganged up on Boris Johnson, they and made a big fuss about Partygate. We were all breaking the rules when we could during COVID. Who wasn't?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah,
So,
it was disgraceful.
yeah.
But tell me, do you see any threat from fragmentation of Europe? I'm got in mind the Czech Prime Minister assassinated, but or at least an attempted assassination, but nonetheless was moving towards Moscow.
Well, he was moving towards Moscow, and so obviously it would be somebody or some movement that was trying to express their displeasure at that rather a blunt way of expressing a displeasure to shoot some poor guy. But anyway, but your basic question is, do I see fragmentation? And yes, I do. I think the European Union is an unholy mess. Everybody is pushing their vested interests, and it has been fragmented from the beginning. But it is becoming even more so, and I'm so happy about that, because I'd love to see it go the way of all good things and cease to exist. A little bit like the original League of Nations didn't survive. We eventually got the United Nations post-war, post-Second World War, and you've seen what a mess the United Nations has turned out to be. Just an instrument for the small countries to gang together to beat the big countries over the head and pass laws and express political views that are in their own selfish interest. And half of these countries are run by totalitarian despots. So the United Nations has outlived its uselessness as opposed to usefulness. And the same thing with Europe. I believe that the fragmentation of Europe is a wonderful thing. The idea of a world government, everybody living in harmony, living in peace, isn't it beautiful? Flowers in the hair, dancing in the streets, free beer, wonderful. A John Lennon concept of the world. Oh, it's lovely, beautiful. Who can vote against motherhood and apple pie? But I mean, full of nonsense. The human race are a bunch of antagonists, miserable, selfish, profiteering individuals. I mean, the sooner the human race is wiped off the face of the planet and we elect a cat as president or some other benign creature, the better. So the dream of living all together in harmony, tell that to the guy in North Korea, tell that to the guy in Iran, tell that to the guy in Russia, tell that to the guy in China. I mean, they're just laughing at us. They tell that to the murderer in the street who just stabs somebody just for the pleasure of it. I mean, what an awful bunch we are, and we've inherited the planet, and what a mess we've made of that. So the living in harmony and peace and glory and beautiful, and not everybody wearing pink dresses. Go and see the movie Barbie if you want to see what the world would look like in an ideal situation. Great movie, by the way. No, we're just joking. We're kidding ourselves, and it's it will be the survival of the strongest, of the fittest, and the
Harry. Any sci-fi movie where an alien civilization comes, is they always want to take you to your leader, and the leader actually always turns out to be a leader of a confederation of nations.
Mm-hmm.
But if, in fact, you at this very moment were asked to devise what you would have as a world governance, what would you do?
A world government. Wow. I think that, again, in all fairness, now to the human race, the needs of each nation are so different. The challenges they face are so different. The stage of development is so varied that it would be difficult to have a one-size-fits-all form of government, in my opinion. It's much better to remain, for the moment, a grouping of nation states that survive in reasonable harmony, to helping each other when necessary. I do believe that the more advanced societies should be helping the poor societies. That I believe the strong should help the weak, but not to be bound into some sort of formal arrangement which can be abused, a little bit like dependence on state help, which is debilitating the British workforce. 9 million people sucking off the hind, whatever, and not working, and the taxpayer having to pay for that. If you get a collective system, like collective farming in Russia in the 30s, collective systems have been proven not to work. So a world government, I don't think, is a good thing. A loose but sincere federation of nation states, I believe, is the answer. But again, it's one man's opinion, and I am not an expert.
But actually, opinion is terribly important because,
Mhm.
I mean, one of the things that this, what we're doing right now stands for is to be able to express an opinion, because there are too many organizations, nations, people who try to stop opinion.
Mhm.
They don't like what you have to say, so let's do away with it.
Well,
And I think that's something that we do have to stop. The erosion is frightening.
well, absolutely, because people have now just support a badge or a particular mark or a line of political thought. There used to be, and if we're talking in American political terms, a lot of cross the aisle cooperation. Now there isn't. You've got the Democrats and the Republicans, and they're at each other's throats. Now that's not healthy. You need to have cooperation. You need to find the middle ground in many of these problems, and the ability to do that. So people have got fixed ideas, and then fixed ideas, when it's a rock runs up against a hard place, I mean, it doesn't produce any positive result. So people have been categorized into ideological components, and I think that's one of the problems why the world is experiencing the difficulties that it has today. There is no common thread, and that what could that common thread be? I suppose the old values were the family, religion, the school, the church. Whichever church it was, these were the cement that bound individual nations together, societies together, and they've gone. The family unit is exploded. Most families end up, not most, one I'm silly to say that, something approaching half of the families end up in divorce, I believe, now. The reconstituted families, the church, let's not talk about the church. It seems to have disappeared off the face of the map. I think very soon the largest single religious movement in Britain will be the Islamist movement. The Church of England has gone to hell in a handbasket with these useless people in charge of it. The school, well, the school, just, you go to school, it becomes a question of everybody leveled down to the lowest common denominator. You're not allowed to have prestige academies where people can achieve beyond the average level. They want to do away with grammar schools and bring everything down to the lowest possible level. And schools, there's no discipline in schools anymore. They don't respect the teachers, so we can write off schools. And I'm trying to think what else there. I did mention there the major building blocks of a society, but they've all gone. They've all gone by the board. Everybody's out for their own selfish needs. Most important thing in a kid's life now is to have the latest model iPhone.
Yeah. Do you think that? I mean, sometimes one has to speak the unspeakable. Do you see that even in stable societies, such as our own constitutional monarchy, of which there are 9 versions in Europe, do you think that they could face turmoil, volatility?
I didn't quite understand the question, Keith.
You're actually pointing out some of the weaknesses of our present society, and what I'm asking is, could this result in volatility, particularly in those areas that have traditionally felt safe? I mean, we haven't really seriously considered that revolution or uproar might take place in Britain, for instance.
Well, of course, and I think we see the signs of that, and the authorities, and to a degree, aided and abetted by the news media, are keeping the lid on that. It's amazing. We have in France every day a public stabbing in the street, every day. But it's reported in isolation, and a little footnote at the bottom of page 17. But it's becoming a form of collective behavior. Violence is becoming predominant. We've got in Britain, and in France, we've got 60 cities which have no-go areas where the police are not even
60?
allowed to. 60. Wow. Where the police can only go if they go in force. They wouldn't dare send a single bobby or even 2 bobbies in the car. You'd have to send in the force. And in these no-go areas in France, if they go in even like 5 or 6 police cars, the police cars get stoned or fire bombs thrown at them. Let's not think that Britain has escaped that. You get parts of some of those big northern towns where grooming gangs for young women to become prostitutes, where Sharia law is practiced openly, where schools can be closed if they or teachers fired if they do something that displeases the local immigrant population. We've seen that too many times. In France, we got one teacher beheaded, and Mr. FThe is a terrible affair. Some kid just come up and cut off his head, and the teacher stabbed in the classroom. It's going on. The breakdown of society is manifest, but we report that in separate elements. It's never reported as a trend. And certainly it's not reported in the context of the waves of immigration that are coming in with their values and their customary beliefs, their religions. Because if we did report it as a collective phenomenon, we'd be accused of racism. The 10 most wanted criminals in France have all got Arab names. But if you say that, that's a racist statement. So you're not allowed to say it. So that would never appear in any newspaper anywhere. You've got to look for that information from other sources. But by far, and in fact, I think on the top 50 most wanted criminals in France, um, 2/3 of them have got Arab names. Now, does that mean you're against the Arabs? Does that mean that you're, by stating that, I mean, that you're being racist? Problem is that in modern dialogue, if you expose these figures, you can be accused of racism.
Yes, yes. And yet the funny thing is that I mean, having spent considerable time in the Balkans, nobody really gets excited when they say Albanian gangsters. And in fact, there's a movie with Liam Neeson made called Taken, in which they focus on the Albanian gangsters in France.
Mm-hmm.
When it's sort of removed by fiction, nobody cares, and yet, as you say, you're heavily censured if you say it in the real life situation.
Oh, absolutely. And small nations can get away with doing this, but large nations can't because we're accused of being the dominant factor in world society. Nonsense about colonialism and slavery that is currently being used to hit us over the head. I mean, and yet in the world today, slavery, which the British put an end to, 1833 onwards, I think it was, and at great expense and at great loss of life on the part of the British. 1,600 British sailors lost their lives, and 1/4 of the Royal Navy expenditure went on stopping the slave trade. But we don't get any credit for that.
Yeah.
What we're accused of is being part of the slave trade 200 or 300 years ago, of which we were, but by far the biggest slave traders were the Africans themselves and the Arabs. And right now, there are more slaves in the world than ever there were before. The entire Uyghur nation in China has been put into virtual bondage, slavery. I mean, it's just amazing. And yet, the accusation being whereby we've got to pay reparations for something that we should be on our knees and apologize for the treatment of the poor people that were enslaved, but their children, their grandchildren, their great grandchildren, many of them are now in high office and earning vast amounts of money and having a wonderful time. And this half-witted Archbishop of Canterbury wants the church, which desperately needs money to rebuild its Christian base and get people back into church pews, wants to give them $1 billion because some of the churches were built by money made by slave traders. I mean, what sort of an idiot is? And he's in charge of that, and I think they want to give him a knighthood now or something. I mean, scandalous, totally unfit to govern and organize. I'm not a religious person, but I do believe in the importance of religion, the Christian religion, because I believe its basic laws, the Ten Commandments, are an essential means, structure for conducting your life. So I'm sad to see the demise of religion, even if I'm not religious myself. And to think that the protection of that institution has been put in the hands of a half-wit like that, I mean, scares the hell out of me. Anyway, that's rather a blunt statement.
Actually, once again, I've rubbed shoulders with the Archbishop of Canterbury because I once belonged to a club that he belonged to, and he resigned because we wouldn't allow women to become members. Is the age-old argument?
Well, there you go. Archbishop of Canterbury, probably, Keith, a nice guy. Probably a lovely guy. You know, obviously bright. I mean, he's well educated, he's successful, and he was successful in business before he went into the church. Very interesting a guy to spend the evening with, but absolutely useless if the job is done. I mean, but it goes
Yeah.
on. The Paula Vennells of this world put in charge of the post office. I
Yes.
mean, all these people, probably nice enough people, you know, great people to have an interesting chat with about the weather and you name it, but absolutely incompetent to a degree. They should never have
Yeah,
been.
absolutely. I mean, Nigel Farage and the NatWest Bank
Yeah.
is incredible.
Hmm.
But the thing is, you know, Harry, that once people are in charge of a little group like this, it is very difficult to shift them.
Hmm. Indeed, it is. Indeed. And of course, they develop their own sycophancy around them. You get all the people who yes minister types who are going to
Yes.
you know they're trying to get themselves promoted or a better deal than their own conditions. So you get a clan forming, and you know where people are clawing each other as they try to you know make their way up the corporate ladder. Again, part of the human makeup, part of the human condition, the way we behave towards each other. But very often, the people that get to the top. Do you remember, for instance, many years ago, there was a book written called the Peter Principle,
Yes.
and it argued that people very often got promoted beyond their level of competence, and that's the case. And there are very few people who have true leadership qualities.
Yeah.
And so, very often, the choice of who to promote, the raw material isn't there, and the factors that go into making the decisions, collective decisions, decisions made by committees. I mean, committees. Well, you know, I mean, what's the famous old story is committees, and that I guess what they said a camel is a horse designed by a committee. No, we want this, we want that, we want a hump here, and we want everybody get what they want, and it doesn't look like a horse anymore at all. It looks like a camel. So no, don't talk. You need strong leadership, but you need competent leadership, and
Yes.
there's a dearth of competent leadership at the moment. Takes us all the
Oh,
way back into the current
yeah,
election.
I couldn't agree. Well, and at every level, at every level. I mean, I curl when I watch. Oh, good morning, Philip.
Good morning, both.
Yeah.
Good morning.
How are
When
you,
I,
Harry?
when I
I'm
watch
just,
the
we're talking
the
about the strength of leadership, about
yeah,
having strong leaders. I mean, it's a very good opportunity with Philip's arrival to make the connection here, make the link between. Could you possibly say that Keir Starmer is a strong leader?
No, I couldn't.
I mean,
He's actually greyer than John Major was.
absolutely made out of cardboard. I mean, there's nothing there. There's no sense of leadership, of inspiration, of drive.
Well,
And he's going to become prime minister simply because he's not a Tory. They just want the Tories out. So we're going to get people like him. I mean,
that sadly is going to be the case. Yeah.
yeah.
But
what about his deputy? What's your assessment of her?
Well,
Well,
Angela Rayner.
Yeah.
Angela Rayner was, well, if I was a bit younger, I would have tried my chances with her. But but you know, but my time is past, and I think hers is getting there too. No, she's doctrinaire. She's more Corbynist than Starmerist. I think the girl there, oh gosh, names escape me. This Shadow Chancellor. She's a bright kid. Rachel Reeves. Yeah, she's been giving some thought to the budget and to how to handle the purse strings. And luckily she's not too doctrinaire. And so she looks as if she could want to manage the money well, but I don't think she hasn't got the necessary skills. But then again, look at so many people in high position. Look at the Bank of England, who's in charge at the moment. You know, they couldn't run a party in a brewery.
A phrase I used that made Keith laugh earlier in the week was, it was a railway worker who said of Southern Rail that they couldn't run a tap.
Right.
Which I thought was quite witty. Angela Rayner, she's a big fibber, you know. It's not just about this property business.
Mm-hmm.
She's from my hometown of Stockport.
Mm-hmm.
And she makes out that she's from some sort of impoverished background. Rubbish. The area of Stockport she was brought up in is far from impoverished. So, you know, she's just a fibber, really.
Mm-hmm. Well,
you know, she may catch a cold with this alleged lying about property. So we'll have to see.
Well, I think that's a little bit unfair. It's not to defend her. She saw an opportunity to make a couple of quid, which most people would grab if they saw it. The idea that all politicians should be whiter than the driven snow is a bit unfair. That would exclude 99% of the population from being politicians, and certainly some of our great politicians of the past, whether it's Lloyd George, Churchill, any of them, there were blemishes on their record as human beings. I just wonder if it isn't a cheap way of trying to create a problem with them. And when we look how many members of the Conservative Party have been shamed recently.
Absolutely. This isn't party political.
We can't expect them to be holier than thou. I think politicians should be judged on their competence at the job we're asking them to do, and rather than to try to look for peccadillos in their own personal lives. But anyway, but if she's broken the law, and there is a law, and Philip, you're a man of the law, then the law is there to protect society, and not all laws are good laws.
My understanding of what she's accused of is, in effect, a breach of the law, as well as the regulations constraining members of Parliament and what they have to declare.
Right.
That's my understanding. Okay, it's not crime of the century. She's denying it vehemently. But if anything's to be believed, then it was ironically a neighbour of hers, then a friend, who witnessed the key signatures on this property deal, who is now blowing the whistle. Mind you, I haven't heard any mention of it for a while, so maybe I don't think he'll go to bed. He won't be put to bed. He won't go to sleep. Because the big thing today, which is a great thing, is that they are finally passing the bill to acquit, to exonerate the post office people who were wrongly convicted in the Horizon scandal. And that's going to go through Parliament today. They've made room for it by not debating the no-fault eviction law. The banning of that. They're not going to do that this session. because today is the last day they can sit.
Well, I have
before
a question for you, Philip. I mean, I'm amazed that since we've known the truth long before this inquiry, but the details are coming out now in the post office inquiry, why weren't these people exonerated long before now? I mean,
I couldn't agree with you more.
Some of them have died. Some of them have committed suicide.
Yes.
Some of their lives have been ruined, and yet we've known now for a long time that this was a scandal. And only now we're passing that law. That's a bit late in the day, isn't it, for justice to be applied?
It is. And also, they could have done it much more quickly, but they were scared of the expense and the publicity. They could have done it much more quickly through the courts themselves.
Mm-hmm.
What should have happened, and it's a procedure I and Richard Barton in the old days used to do a lot prosecuting, was if something was dodgy, you bring the person back to court, public hearing, you agree with the defence barrister that that person is, we call it rearranged, so another plea is taken. The judge says yes. The person then says not guilty, either for the first time or again, and the prosecution then offer no evidence. And a proper judicial verdict of not guilty is entered.
Mm-hmm.
But they didn't do that.
Do you see a similarity here between that and the blood tainted blood scandal? Or?
I don't, but I haven't given that much thought.
Yeah. It seems a long time. It's taken an awful long time.
Oh, I see. Sorry, I see your point. Sorry, I was being too linear there. Mm-hmm. You mean the amount of time it's taken?
Yeah.
Of course, there's an obvious analogy there or similarity, and it's shameful.
Mm-hmm.
But you know this better than me. If I were asking you this question, I suspect you would say, Philip, this is vested interests. Mm-hmm. This is the establishment. They want to cover everything up. They want to delay everything in the hope that it might go away or be forgotten about.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's only happened because of that TV series, Harry.
Yeah, quite, yeah. No, I mean, if you were asking me these questions, the danger is that I'm an opinionated old bugger, and I would come out.
No, you're not. No.
Some statement about it.
You're a pussycat.
Yes, right or wrong, but I defer to the professionals, and it's you are, as I say, a man of the law, and you have all of that information at your fingertips, and I suppose one could argue that whether you're a politician or whether you're a doctor in the blood scandal, whether you're a postmaster that's been wrongfully accused, one hopes that the law is such that it protects as much as it punishes. That if people are innocent, that they're declared.
Absolutely.
It shouldn't be just a means of punishing. It should be a means of establishing a person's innocence too.
Yes, well, there is that. I've described the procedure that should have happened, and a long time ago. I mean, I queried months and months ago when Richard Barton, the other barrister, was doing programs with me. We both queried, Keith will remember, we both queried. Well, no, I asked him because he's a proper jurisprudential lawyer.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we're talking about a guy who got a first from Oxford, not a small beer like me. He's a proper brain, Richard. And I asked the question of him live. Is it right that the legislature is being used to acquit these people? Because I couldn't see what that Act of Parliament, which it will be by tonight, hopefully, it's going to have to be a hell of a document, because every single one of those people who, in my view, were entitled to have another hearing on their own, so that each and every one of them experienced the judicial system exonerating them, instead of just a piece of paper, which it has to me, it has to include every single name. You can't just say, oh, all of them who were convicted or pleaded guilty, yeah, you're all okay now. You can't just say that. It has to be on record that every single individual is identified.
I can see why. I can see why. Yes, because even amongst the sub postmasters, I don't know how many things. Is it 300 or more of them were involved? There may
no, it was over 900.
Oh, 900 was it? There may be one or two that are guilty.
Well, we returned, don't we, to a point initially raised with Keith when the two Bs were on, and then you more recently. The system let them down, not just because of the end result, but the lawyers working for the post office were frankly a disgrace. And every rule of disclosure to the defense was broken. Now, you raised the point weeks ago. How on earth could it be that so many people were doing the same thing and didn't know about each other? Because the defense lawyers in the early days, they weren't told, oh, your client is one of 900.
Oh, I see.
The disclosure wasn't made because it wasn't being done by the Crown Prosecution Service. It was being done, and it can't happen again because they no longer do it now, but it was being done by the post office's in-house lawyers.
Yes, yeah.
I mean, the bit of the inquiry that fascinated and horrified me was a barrister who I won't name, who I worked with for years. He mainly prosecuted, and he was hauled up in front of that inquiry. And the stuff he had to admit that had gone on was shameful. It reflected badly on him, and it reflected badly on the independent bar, because he was being led by the nose by an in-house lawyer. And basically, there was a technical report by an IT specialist of some repute. And his initial report says, you haven't got a case. You know, this system is flawed. And they persuaded him to change his report. And it was the barrister who, and he admitted all this in the inquiry and apologized profusely, but that's all very well. You know, Paula Venel, who gave evidence recently, you know, broke down in tears 4 or 5 times. Okay, but you weren't one of the poor buggers who went to prison or lost members of the family or lost your livelihood. All you lost was your damehood because of the shame. So apologies are all very well, but it was an absolute scandal.
And you say that can't happen again because the post office had its internal right to prosecute, but now that's been withdrawn. And
it's been removed.
And only the Crown Prosecution Service can.
Yeah. So I'm not saying the CPS are squeaky clean either, but they will leak in the later cases. Disclosure was made, including the flaws in the system, and that's when things began to happen, because the defense teams got together and persuaded judges to pay for their own technical evidence to compare and test what the prosecutions were saying.
So effectively,
and that's when the cracks began to open.
Yeah. So effectively, the post office, the internal workings of the post office, they were judge and jury.
Absolutely. That's exactly the point, Keith.
That's terrible. I mean, as a as a layman,
No,
knows nothing about the law.
it was absolutely scandalous.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, I was pleased that when all this came out, I had retired, because I would not be able to look my ex-colleague who was in that inquiry, I would not be able to look him in the eye without saying something. I was horrified. He never did it on any cases of mine, but because I trusted him. But
that's an interesting point there, Philip, because the lawyers and lawyers and men of the law, they take an oath, and we then tend to see them as almost being superhuman. It's rare, really, that they let the side down. They are human beings, after all. They have all of the potential faults that we all have, but we tend to put lawyers and doctors on a pedestal. But we see that doctors and the blood scandal, or doctors in other aspects of life, are not as pure as we would like them to be.
That's right. We
Yeah.
are all human. I've never felt that I've been put on a pedestal as a barrister. I mean, people were good enough to compliment my skills or compliment me upon my skills. But to put anybody on a pedestal is a mistake anyway, isn't it? But the barristers were never asked to take an oath, Harry. The only ceremony the barrister goes through is when he or she is called to the bar. So that's when, if and when you pass your bar finals, the Inn of Court, one of the 4 Inns of Court, like a gentleman's club, basically, which is your alma mater as a barrister for life. You then have a ceremony that is called being called to the bar.
But you commit yourself, though, to uphold the law at that particular point, do you? Or
well, in your own heart, you do. Yes.
Yeah. Well, there's no formal ceremony where you.
No, there's no formal ceremony whereby you take an oath, but you are bound immediately by the barrister's code of conduct.
Oh, I see. Because the medical.
Well, they take the Hippocratic oath.
Hippocratic oath, don't they?
They take the Hippocratic oath, which is to save life, effectively.
Yeah.
Been on the news this morning here in Sussex. I think Keith will have seen it. We were talking, Keith and I think yesterday. There's another contributor on this program called Liza Page. You complimented her on what you called her natural beauty, if you remember. And she talks about you all the time now. You old rogue. But
I'm in with a chance, eh?
I'm in no doubt. If you gave her your address, she'd be on your doorstep in a day. What Madame Atherton would say about that, I dread to think.
No, I'd probably get decapitated. But
yes. Does your wife have a private guillotine then?
I'm sure she has. Yes.
But Liza has been.
You got my cavalry sword still. So.
Well, if you hear a grinding noise, she's obviously sharpening that for you, Harry. But Liza has problems with her pancreas. Thus far, it's been pancreatitis, which is bad enough. But they're always on the lookout if that changes to cancer, because pancreatic cancer is the worst. There's no doubt about it. You're an absolute goner. They can't do a thing about it. Anyway, she was rushed into hospital. against her wishes, she was rushed into what's called the Royal Sussex, which is in Brighton. And the Royal Sussex has the most appalling reputation. And as I was discussing with Keith, when the wife of a good friend of mine was there having a very serious back operation, when he and I went to visit her, we couldn't find the ward. I mean, the place is just, it's like a maze.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm only mentioning this because Liza was saying what a bad experience it had been. She wasn't criticising the carers, but just the state of the hospital, and she didn't want to go to the Royal Sussex. And the paramedic said, "Sorry, madam, we have to take you there. That's where we're told to take you." And she ended up, she was on a trolley for hours, and I mean, just awful. But only this morning it broke that a surgeon at the Royal Sussex, who had done a perfectly straightforward hernia operation on a 65-year-old man, realised as he drove home that he'd done the operation wrong. And he realised that he'd left a specimen bag inside the man's stomach, and B, had cut the colon. So he had to drive all the way, he drove all the way back, fessed up to what he'd done, and then did an emergency operation on the patient to get the specimen bag out and sort the colon out. Well, that's a level of care we can all do without, I think. And in the same article, there's supposedly a culture of fear and bullying within the surgical unit at that hospital. So it's a place I will never go to. I really won't ever go there.
Is that a microcosm? Well, a large microcosm, mind you, of the problem that exists with the NHS in general.
It is an absolute microcosm. Absolutely right. It's endemic. Again, Keith and I were discussing the other day, because the people I know who work in the NHS in very many different roles, from managers to midwives to whatever, their common opinion is it needs to be stripped down to the absolute basics and rebuilt, because it's Byzantine, it's creaky, it's riddled with jealousies, and there are like you often say about things, too many managers, overpaid. It's the staff that get the shit basically.
But the frontline care, one hopes still that the frontline care, you've got dedicated people and handling that part of it. But is it possible to reconstitute the NHS? I mean, the Conservative Party may have had a notion to do it, but it's hard to see the Socialist Party coming in doing anything about it, because it is the brainchild. It was Attlee's brainchild, or Bevan, was it? It's a creation of socialist thinking, isn't it?
Yes. Well, Keith described it when we last spoke about this as the sacred cow.
Yes.
And I think that summed it up rather well.
But the more money you throw at it, the more you're likely to exacerbate the problem.
No, that's precisely the point. I mean, what the Tories intended to do was semi-privatise it. That's what they wanted, because they always think that's the great panacea, don't they?
Yeah.
But I'm sure, echoing what you think, that they realised that they were meddling with a sacred cow. And privatisation just doesn't seem to work. Instance, the railways.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the one thing that Starmer has got right. He won't deliver, but he wants to renationalise. He wants to let the franchises exhaust themselves and not renew them. And that will take at least 5 years. Whether he'll deliver that, who knows? I don't trust Labour governments. Never have.
I think one of the basic problems, Philip, is that we, the people, have lost faith in any of these governments.
Right, no, absolutely.
We don't have faith in the parliamentary Tory party, and we do not have faith in the impending disaster of a socialist government.
No.
I just wonder. Generally, I like to think of myself as a positive person, but I just wonder what the solution is, where we're headed. I don't see any imminent. We've got somebody else. And
Bonjour.
It's Professor Mark Maybe.
Bonjour, monsieur.
Bonjour, vous allez bien?
Très bien.
Très bien, parfait.
He's a typical clayhead. He just says monsieurs. I mean, it's like Del Boy. It's Monsieur. Monsieur. Call yourself a professor.
Clayhead, duck. I'm up here, duck. Hey up, duck.
Yes. Well, it's nice to see you, Mark. Yes. As ever, Harry and I were having a semi-intelligent conversation. But I stopped that then. It was wearing my brain cell out. So you're a fresh voice.
I made it today, Harry. The railway network of the UK's grind to a halt. Tuesday, I went down to London on Monday, paid round about £300 for my ticket to go from Stoke-on-Trent to London, 1 hour, 20 minutes. Went to get my train at 6 o'clock, cancelled due to lack of train staff. 7 o'clock train, cancelled due to lack of train staff. So I had to stay in London on Monday night, come back Tuesday, spent a couple of £100 on a hotel. So and now the good news this week was that Virgin Trains, who we got a couple of train companies, Virgin Trains ran the total incompetent system for about 10 years. They're now competing with Avanti, which is the current train service. So it's not going to get any better. So I think I'm not going to leave.
Those figures that you give me are quite amazing. £300 to go from just an hour 20 train journey.
£296 to go from, this is peak. So if you want to go off peak, you can't travel till after 10 o'clock.
But this is way more than airfares, isn't it?
Yeah, I could have come and seen you in France for that.
Absolutely. I mean, gosh, I'm amazed.
Yeah. It's and even off peak, with one of those old man's rail cards, it's still just over £100.
Excuse me, they're called a senior rail card. Could you show some respect to your elders? I've got one.
I've got one too. But it is just it's. I don't know whether, Phil, you travel on the train tour, but it's just ridiculous. In fact, I said to the people that I went to, I most probably won't come down again now because I was so sick.
No, I mean, Keith told me about this, and I totally empathised with you. It's bloody awful. Thankfully, I don't do those sort of long journeys privately or professionally anymore. And I don't miss the trains locally or intercity, as we used to call them, at all. In fact, I've got this rail card. I think I've only used it once. I've probably made a loss on the rail card. But of course, one trip I will be doing, I hope, sometime, is to see you guys in Lewis.
Yeah, me too.
But you are one of the long list of people, Professor, who want to be at Harry Atherton's door. he's having to fight off his fans, male and female. So you know, everybody's very keen to get over there. And Keith and I had a giggle the other day because I had this, as ever with me, barking mad vision. Because Harry is so outspoken, I had this vision of me dressed as a gendarme turning up on his doorstep and doing a Peter Sellers. I'm the officer of the law. I'm here to arrest you for speaking out too much. I've let the cat out the bag now, but because I haven't got a passport, I could never do that anyway. But it would be funny.
They wouldn't let you out the country.
No,
Phil.
no.
You know,
It's like Rylands and Fletcher. I'm just a damn nuisance.
Well, to be quite honest with you, if we held a board meeting in Harry's village, it would be cheaper than going to London.
It would be.
It would indeed.
And
Yeah.
a bloody
It would be,
sight nicer,
absolutely.
and a damn sight nicer place too.
Absolutely.
yeah. I'm
Well,
thinking only-
Do any of you remember that?
The sun is shining, the skies are blue.
dull here.
It's dull here.
Dull,
Do any of
raining.
you remember the Only Fools and Horses Christmas special where Del Boy and Rodney in the little three-wheeler drove to France to a memorial service for British servicemen who served in that area of France during the war.
Mhm.
And they were going in place of Uncle Albert because Uncle Albert had died. Not that he was ever a proper naval man. He always pretended he was. Anyway, so this phase of the program, you've got Del Boy and Rodney in the car. They're totally lost. Don't speak a word of French. Del Boy says to Rodney, "Rodney, what's the French for duck?" And Rodney goes, "Canard." And Del Boy says, "You can say that again, bruv. You can say that again." and then Del Boy says, "Well, what's the French for à l'orange, Rodney?" "À l'orange." "Bloody hell," said Del. "Why can't they get their own words?" Anyway, they're approaching the village, and you've got all these French grandees, military and the mayor and everything, a scene that Harry will identify with straight away. And the three-wheeler starts to backfire. And everybody in the parade hits the ground because they actually think that there's gunfire when it's actually the Reliant Robin.
Sure.
It's just brilliant stuff. I mean, you just can't beat it. It's
Classic. Yeah, classic.
absolute classic.
Yeah, classic.
No, but the idea of a board meeting in Harry's local cafe, well, I might even buy a passport for that.
Yeah, sounds like the
Oh, there you
I
go.
think we talked last week about words that have gone out of
Yes.
most probably gone out of fashion, and plonker was another one, wasn't
Plonker.
it? Rodney, you plonker.
Yeah, Rodney, you know, and he all seems to call him a tart, didn't he? I use that, you see.
Yes.
You know,
Dipstick.
Rodney, you tart.
You tart, yeah. Did he use the word dipstick too?
I think he did use the word dipstick.
Yeah, dipstick, yeah.
Yeah.
Dipstick.
Anyway, listen, guys. I've got another obligation now. I'm going to have to leave you, love you, and leave you for the moment. But delighted to have been talking with you all this morning. And we'll be back on Monday. Is that correct?
Monday is a holiday, Harry.
Yeah.
So I was going to ask you if you could, if you would be available on Tuesday.
On Tuesday, just let me take a quick look. I'm sure I will be. Yeah, no problem. That's the 28th, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's good. Yeah. 28th
All right.
is good. Yeah.
And just before you go, Melissa had hoped to get Connor, her son, on this morning because he has spent the week covering the Trump trial. And it would give us an opportunity to get a cold face report
that'd
of
be good, yeah.
what it's like to be in a courtroom with Donald Trump. They're not due for another 10 minutes, but if you find yourself able to pop back, please do.
Okay, but so I see. Yeah. No, but I've got an engagement now, so I probably won't not see you until Tuesday.
Okay. Well, good to see you, Harry.
Okay, you too, and God bless you all. Okay, bye for now. Bye.
Adieu.
Adieu. That's it. Adieu. Adieu. Man, not adieu means forever. Au revoir. Au revoir.
I thought adieu meant farewell.
You say that to the dearly departed.
Oh, Christ.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Philip, I thought that you might be able to hang on just a little while, because I think being a former barrister talking to Connor about the trial might be very interesting for everybody.
No, I was intending to hang on for Mark and then Melissa anyway.
Good. Excellent. Anyway, I'll send the invitation to Melissa and vicariously to Connor. So we hopefully can get them on in the next 10 minutes. But I thought that we've had a very interesting session so far this morning. Harry is in good form. You're in good form, Philip, and Mark is always. I
don't know why, because I've got a bloody awful hangover.
Oh dear!
You got some red wine last night.
Well, I went to a funeral.
Oh,
I went to a funeral yesterday afternoon, and the widower put on this fantastic wake in our local town hall in the chamber, the upper chamber. And the caterer served a red wine called the Governor.
The Governor.
Which I'd never tasted before.
No.
It was like being hit by a sledgehammer. It just shows the plonk that I drink is not the real McCoy. If you'll forgive the mixed metaphors there.
Yes.
So it lasted well into the early evening.
Wow.
Everybody had a whale of a time. It was this lady who eventually died. She'd been in an Alzheimer's home for 10 years.
Wow.
So she hadn't been at home for all that time. And John, her widower, lives literally across the road from us. So he's rattling around in this huge house, which he intends to live in until he's carried out in a box, he says. Or as Harry Atherton would say, it's not the cough that carries you off, it's the coffin they carry you off in. Which I thought was quite good for Harry, really. Yeah, so it was a hell of a bash, but the family were more relieved than sad, because she hadn't recognized any of them. There are children and grandchildren, and Joan hadn't recognized any of them for years.
Yeah, that's terrible.
Which is absolutely heartbreaking.
Yeah.
For all of them. So I think the mood was one of somber relief until the wine kicked in.
Yeah, and then the governor sorted it out.
The governor sorted it out, and there was loads of it, because people would have, they'd start off with the red wine, but then they'd all switch to white, which I never do.
No.
So, to my wife's chagrin, the caterers were encouraging me to drink as much as I wanted.
I would imagine, Phil, that wasn't a particularly difficult job.
I was a pushover, as you can imagine, Mark. I was a complete pushover. And yes, I don't need asking twice.
No, me neither, no.
I was like a kid in a sweet shop, quite frankly.
Yeah, couldn't be better.
And because I drank so much, my knee ceased to hurt. And I was actually able to walk home, which was, well, stagger home.
Stagger, yeah.
Which was the furthest I've walked, pain-free, for a long time. But the problem with alcohol is it does then wear off.
No.
You pay the price.
And the bits that hurt again. And when you're drinking a new type of much stronger wine, boy, what a hangover. God.
What a work, yeah. You just need to keep it topped up, don't you now, Phil?
Well, it's hair of the dog time, isn't it, Mark?
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
It's hair of the dog.
Got to keep those levels up, you know.
Yes. My liver.
Yeah. I just turned around to see if Declan was behind the bar. He's come in, but he's moved off. Because I was going to ask him to provide you each with a drink.
That would be,
yeah.
I've got cranberry juice, not very good.
Who'll get you?
Yeah, a bit trendy.
It looks a suspiciously similar colour to red wine.
Red wine, yeah, doesn't it? Yeah. Bit weak though.
Cranberry juice. I don't think even Declan, with all his charm and skills, could deliver to Mark and me a drink in Arundel and Stoke.
No. It may be that we'd have to drink it for you.
Yeah, you could do that, Keith.
Well, you can do that, Keith.
You could make that up, Keith.
Give us a job. I can do that. Yeah.
I can do it easy.
Can I just comment on the root cause of Philip's hangover? The one funeral that I really remember was in Belfast. There is a very small Jewish community, so a small Jewish cemetery, and I went to a friend's father's funeral, and we ended up, because it was so small, the little crepe hats that they wear, they ran out of. So we put a handkerchief on our heads. And here we were with a handkerchief on our heads in nice suits, reading the burial service in Hebrew, back to front. And the absurdity of it just struck me, and I got the giggles.
It was Michael Palin, wasn't it, who invented the like the Forrest Gump, not Forrest Gump, but that sort of character in Monty Python with the Wellington boots, the ridiculous clothes, and the handkerchief on his head.
Yes.
I think he called him Gumby or something. Yeah. Yeah. Well, Mark,
it's a sign of age, though, isn't it? Unfortunately, these days, it's definitely a sign of age. All I get invited to are funerals, not my own, but I don't seem to ever go to a wedding or a baptism. It's exercise.
It's a definite generational thing. I'm afraid.
Yeah, it's a sad state of affairs.
Well,
it's interesting what you're saying, though, Phil. My mum passed away in November after a very short. She was 93, And she interesting enough, she always said to me, I don't want to go into a home and I don't want to go into hospital. And she got to 93, and I didn't think, she just decided that she didn't want to go on anymore.
Yeah.
And so she asked me to gather all her friends together over a week or so, and all her friends came to see her. And my daughter came up and spent the weekend. And she literally did just fade away.
Yeah.
I'd looked into, and she never wanted to leave the village she lived in. And there's a really lovely nursing home in the village. And so I inquired about it, and I couldn't believe that it was £3,000 a week.
Oh, no. It is horrendous.
Unbelievable. And if I'd sold a house, and she'd lived for even for 8 or 9 months, that all the money would have gone.
Yeah, well, obviously I'm sorry for your loss, but what a lovely age, and just to conk out is an absolute blessing.
Yeah. She lived in a beautiful little Tudor cottage, and in fact the doctor came. She was downstairs on the sofa. I say 93. She was sort of had meeting for weeks, and she said, "I'm going to bed." I said, "Mum, you can't get up," and she managed to get herself up out of bed, and the stairs were like the Eiger.
Yeah,
and she pulled herself up these stairs, got herself into bed. And then 2 days later, she passed away. And I thought that's the way to go, isn't it? Really, when
it is the way to go.
Like that lady you were talking about with dementia or Alzheimer's going on for years, not recognising the kids. It's just must be absolutely terrible.
Yeah, well, I spoke about it with her daughter, who lovely young woman called Philippa. My name with an A on the end, so there was an immediate connection there. And she was describing to me what it was like, because she would take her kids to see Joan in the hope that might trigger something, but it never did.
Mm.
My father-in-law had this for 3 years.
Really?
Before he was 93, actually. I mean, he sort of conked out, but he did have the Alzheimer's. I mean, next door, there's a tragedy going on. There's a Paula who has had long-term bone cancer, but medication, keeping her alive, keeping her okay, suddenly took a turn for the worst. And she went to hospital, then to a hospice, and then they asked her, basically, where do you want to die? Because the cancer's gone to the brain now.
Oh.
So she's having seizures. She's not eating. It's the not eating that takes them away in the end.
Yeah.
Another friend, Jim Cobby, lost his wife a couple of years ago, again, partly due to dementia, but she stopped eating. And he said by the time she went, she was down to like she's only a small lady anyway, but she was like 5 stone.
Good grief, yeah.
So there are ways to go and other ways to go, and all you can hope for.
Do you think, Phil, that nowadays it's like cancer, isn't it? You hear lots of people with cancer, and part of the reason is that it's so brilliant, the detection of it, etc. Now, but 20 years ago, you never heard of people with dementia and Alzheimer's, but they must have had it. They must have been there. Maybe you said they're going a bit loopy, or she's losing her marbles or whatever. But it certainly seemed there's something, as you rightly say, all those people that and like me, I know lots of people that have been diagnosed with it. And I was only thinking, even 10 years ago, you didn't really hear of anyone. I know Mrs. Jones, or I know my next door neighbour. It's really interesting.
My maternal grandfather and my middle name Granville. Don't laugh.
Granville.
Yeah, but
Granville.
but my maternal grandfather, his first name was Granville. He was a printer from Derby. We've got Connor now.
Hello.
Are you going to let him in? Hi, Connor.
Hey, Connor. How are you? Is your mother joining us as well, or just you?
No, just me.
Just you, right.
Well, that'll do.
Great. Nice to see you,
How are
Connor.
you? How are you, Connor?
I'm quite all right. How are you?
Pretty good.
Good. It's a bit late here, Connor. It's about up as 10 here, so you're up bright and early, are you?
Yes, it's about I think 5:30 or so.
Oh, it's very good of you.
When do you leave for the Navy?
Sometime in July, but until then, I'm going to be covering this Trump situation.
You are continue to cover Trump, are you?
Yes. Hopefully, I'm going to be in court for the verdict. It looked like the schedule was going to be having us for the closing, but we're not going to be in closing. We're going to be in the verdict, hopefully. So we're going to see that in person.
And
Right.
when do you expect that to be, Connor?
So that's a good question, because typically in the United States, the quicker the jury comes back with a verdict, the more likely it is to be guilty. So, this is a complex case. There are 34 counts. I expect the jury to sort of sit with it, take some time. It's because it's a complicated legal matter. Again, this is a novel theory, so I would say probably sometime, if not this week, probably in the next 2 to 3 weeks. It's a complicated matter. You might end up with a hung jury. So again, it takes time to get these things done.
Am I right in thinking that there are no majority verdicts allowed in the States?
So it depends. In civil cases, yes, the majority of the jury. You have to have a majority of the jury. In in some states, it can be just 6 jurors have to agree. In New York, it has to be, for a criminal case, it has to be unanimous. So
Yes.
all jurors have to say guilty.
So even if just one refuses to agree with the other 11, I imagine, it's a mistrial.
Yes, it would be a mistrial in that case. It's rare that it's 1 versus 11. Typically, it's a cohort of about 3 or 4 people. But yes,
Right. And has this always interested you, this type of thing, criminal trials, the legal system?
well, I've worked for Japanese public television for some time, and in the course of that, we've covered a lot of pretty interesting trials. We've been to Guantanamo Bay to cover the military, the hearings there. We've been to Sam Bankman-Fried's trial, the famous cryptocurrency scammer, right? And it is interesting, how the legal system, again, in the United States works, and it's interesting in sort of translating that to a Japanese audience.
Well, yes, I can imagine. So, do you speak Japanese?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
I can then just about speak English.
Yeah, that's because you're from the Midlands.
That's because I'm from Stoke, yeah, we say. Yeah,
Connor
the morning
won't
greeting
understand-
here.
Connor
The morning
won't
greeting here, Connor, would
understandably
be,
what I mean, but Professor Mark Maybe, Connor, is from a very backward area of the United Kingdom, and in England we don't think that English is their first language. It's
No, Richard. Our morning gesture here, Connor, is "Hey up, duck! Hey up, duck!"
do
She's
you
got
get the
Japanese,
idea,
but it's
Connor?
"Hey up, duck!"
I mean, it's agricultural. It's barking mad, So how long did you work for the Japanese television company for, Connor?
I've worked for maybe a little almost 2 years.
And so how old were you when you began with them?
be 23, 24.
And had you already learned Japanese?
Yeah, I had already spoken Japanese in college, or as you guys would say, university. So it wasn't too hard to just switch over.
Well, what was the atmosphere like in that courtroom?
In the Trump court, it's well the day I was there was during Michael Cohen's initial testimony, his direct testimony, where he was recounting his version of the story, and it was quite tense. Because we're a lot of laptop, we're on a lot of phones. We can have an internet connection to the laptop to send notes, but we're sitting there and it's really quite tense because again you have Michael Cohen, basically the person who the prosecution is building their argument on, and he was a former lawyer of Donald Trump. Donald Trump knew him quite well, and you have Trump in the courtroom, and so I sort of looked at Trump as he was walking in and out during breaks. He had a sort of scowl on his face, and the courtroom was quite tense. And I imagine, most of this last week and now this week was quite tense. So.
And what's your you've obviously been following the case. We've been following it here in the UK. It's a bit like we have soap operas over here. I don't know if you've heard of them, but like Coronation Street and they're sort of long running sagas. What's your gut feel kind of the outcome of this? Have you got a gut feel?
So I would say that an acquittal is likely. That's my feeling at this point. It's gonna be very hard to convince a jury, especially a jury that has two lawyers on it, that they should convict Trump based on the testimony of another lawyer who's sort of been caught in a lot of lies. We'll see if the prosecution's paper trail is enough for them, but I imagine Trump will be acquitted. I imagine it'll take a couple weeks, but I imagine he's going to get acquitted.
That's interesting.
Will or has Trump himself given evidence?
So Trump hasn't testified, and since the case is rested, he won't. The reason is that it's very easy for the prosecution to trap Trump on the stand in a lie, right? And this case it's a Class E felony. It's not so serious. It isn't so clear, and it's not clear if the jury's going to come back with a guilty verdict. It's more likely to be an acquittal. Perjury is a much more serious crime, and the district attorney, if they think he's committed perjury, will definitely move to prosecute. So I think Trump was smart not to testify. Insofar as submitting evidence, obviously there's discussions between lawyers in the United States where each of them have to give what's called discovery and put forth what they know and put things into evidence, right? So, which I'm sure the prosecution has done to some extent. They didn't make the defense didn't make a case other than to bring one lawyer on the stand, and that wasn't perhaps too helpful. But it was again very limited from the defense's side, which I think was good.
So it sounds to me. I mean, I don't know whether you know via your mum, but I was a barrister for a lifetime over here, criminal barrister, as we call us, an attorney where you're from. Seems to me that what Trump is doing is he's basically saying, prove the case against me. I'm innocent until you prove otherwise. So prove it, put up or shut up, basically. I'm not contributing to this process. Is that right?
So, again, I'm not quite sure how the legal system works in the United Kingdom, but it is incumbent on the prosecution in the United States to make the legal case, to make the case.
Yes.
Yes. So, I think that is perhaps the smart way to go about it, right? Especially in a case like this where it relies on a lot of legal theory. So I think Trump is sort of saying, yes, prove it, right? And the whole case sort of hinges on proving that some of the key witnesses against Trump are lying, and that was
yes. I mean, have they exposed any lies that Cohen has told?
Well, there was a very weird moment where one of the key pieces of evidence was evidence that was a phone call that Michael Cohen, Trump's lawyer, had made to Trump's bodyguard, where Cohen had claimed that he had talked to his bodyguard and his bodyguard handed the phone to Trump, and he told Trump that he had handled this Stormy Daniels payment. That was called into question. That was his initial testimony on Monday, and that was called into question because the defense basically said, no, Michael Cohen was actually talking to Trump's bodyguard about being harassed by a 14-year-old boy. And there was text messages before and after that sort of confirmed that. And the phone call was about 90 seconds, right? And it was after a Trump rally. And you know, so it called into question the veracity of that testimony. There are also a number of other things that Cohen, you know, probably wasn't all too honest about. He made secret or clandestine recordings of his client and others, and he gave a weird reason. Like, so it's clear that he wasn't 100% truthful. I think the jury definitely picked up on that. Right.
Were you there when the defense were able to put to him?
So I was. I got that news from my other coworkers who were there because we sort of been lots. And so that's what they had told me is and I looked at some of the court transcripts because the court transcripts have been made public as well. So yeah.
See, here, if a defendant chooses not to give evidence, the judge has to give the jury a warning, the defense and the jury a warning, because here, the judges now, when they sum up the case, can tell a jury that if they think it's fair and proper, that they could take the defendant's absence from the witness box as indicative of guilt. And we call it an adverse inference. So members of the jury, if you think it's fair and proper, and you think that the defendant has avoided the witness box because he has nothing to say and is vulnerable or, you know, has a dark past, then if you think it's fair and proper, you can put that in the pot as you consider his guilt. Now, in America, in New York, what does a judge have any power to do that?
So that would be probably against the Constitution for a judge to do so.
Yes.
You can't incriminate yourself. You're not going to be made to testify. In criminal proceedings, that's typically the case. In civil proceedings, like in a lawsuit, if the defendant chooses not to testify, yes, adverse inferences can be drawn. In a criminal proceeding,
that's interesting. Right.
In a criminal proceeding, no, but in a civil proceeding, yes.
I mean, in my career, which began long before you were born, it wasn't the case that there was an adverse inference. In those days, it was literally the prosecution bear the burden of proof, and if they don't reach the standard of proof, which is sure or beyond reasonable doubt, that's the end of the matter. And the defendant has an unconditional right not to incriminate himself by going in the witness box. That's how it was for years in the UK. But then they changed the law. They changed the law and introduced adverse inferences. The first one is if a suspect, when questioned by the police, fails to give answers, in other words, does not raise his defense in police interview, and then in court does raise the issues, the jury can ask themselves, well, he said nothing to the police to put his case, Now he's telling us all this time later, has he made this up? So that's the first type of adverse inference, when nothing is raised in interview, but is then relied on in court. The second type of adverse inference is the one I've discussed with you already, which is you can say everything in a police interview, but if you don't go into the witness box in court, there can be an adverse inference for that. So that's how it works over here now, but it's not been like that all the time. This came in about 10 years ago because they were sick of defendants getting off, basically.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that's interesting. You know, our legal system has, again, protections that are enshrined. I guess because I got criminal law. Our country was founded with the idea that you know, during the Enlightenment there was a lot of, obviously the United States was founded during that era, and so our legal system is sort of based on these Enlightenment principles. That sounds like, you know, maybe that's an internal debate politically within the UK about whether or not you have those rights, but
well, we don't have a written constitution, Connor.
Yeah. which is interesting, I guess, how you know, rights are interpreted. You know, again, there's a very strong tradition here of, you know, you can't incriminate yourself or say anything that will incriminate you. You know, because when you're arrested, right, police can try to ask questions to you to make you incriminate yourself. That happens quite often. Is the police can do things that are very you know, suspect, and you know, it's important that you, for example, when you're arrested in the United States, you say, no, I want to speak to legal counsel immediately, because it's not going to be held against you, and it can't be held against you. The only things that can be held against you are what you do say, and that's actually a thing that's written when you're has to be said when you're arrested. Is anything you say or do will be held against you or can be held against you.
Well, exactly. Isn't that the Miranda direction?
Yeah. Miranda, yes.
Yeah, because that's like our caution. Our cops have got to caution a suspect, and even that's changed because of the adverse inferences. The caution, if I can remember it here, is you do not have to say anything, but if when questioned, you fail to raise an issue that you later rely on in court, that can be held against you. Anything you do say will be written down and may be used in evidence. That's what the English cops have to say now, which is a bit of a mouthful. You know, I've had police officers in a witness box in court cases who have been unable to repeat the caution in front of a jury. They get tongue-tied. And you begin to wonder, well, if you're tongue-tied here, how on earth do you get all that out when you're arresting somebody? But hey, that's just an issue of fact. So the US police, they give the Miranda, but there's no business about if you don't mention something now, it'll be held against you. That just doesn't happen in the States.
No, that would be like if a policeman were to say that, you know, that would be an issue. That would be a problem, because that would be you know, coercive, and there would be investigations. You know, even if the police don't read you, if your police don't read you those rights, and they don't read you those rights in the right way, in the right, you know, the case will be thrown out.
Yeah,
yeah.
I've read about this, which is why I knew about the name of the thing, Miranda, because over here, in the jurisprudential sense, we're very aware of and take note of American decisions, particularly the Supreme Court. Now, the Miranda thing comes from the Supreme Court, doesn't it?
Yes.
It's quite a long time ago now, isn't it? Was it in the 80s?
It was. I don't exactly remember when the Supreme Court case was. But again, it sort of has to do with self-incrimination.
Sure.
You cannot incriminate yourself, and the police have a legal requirement. It was ruled that they must tell you. You cannot. You have a legal right to defend yourself. You can't incriminate yourself. What you say is important. What you don't say isn't. So if I could actually.
No, that's a very good way of putting it, Connor. Very good way of putting it. What you do say is important. What you don't say isn't. Yeah, I get that. But
Connor, what was your impression of Trump?
My impression of Trump was he's a tall figure. He's imposing. He's actually 6'3". And a lot of photos maybe don't capture that over there. They sort of
interesting.
But when you're in court, you're just sitting down. He's walking back and forth. He's quite tall. In fact, the only other person in the courtroom that was taller than Trump was his son Eric, who's pretty tall. So again, he's a pretty imposing figure. He has the orange skin, but he's sort of a but almost got like a scary sort of aura about him. It's hard to say.
Well, that confirms the impression I get of him.
Yeah. I take it Dusty Storm or Sandy Storm, whatever her name is, didn't appear.
No, she did.
Yeah, she did.
Oh, but while Connor was there, I meant.
Oh, I see. Sorry.
Did she appear while you were there, Connor? Did you see her?
I didn't see Stormy Daniels. She was there. Yeah, because how it's worked is the U.S. media, and I think some UK media were given sort of permanent slots in court, but a lot of the foreign and international media has had to essentially share four slots in the courtroom each day.
So you had to share, did you? The
Sorry?
NHK. You had to share the NHK.
The NHK we had to share with about 10 other news agencies wanting to get into the courtroom.
Cripes, that's a big share.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Keith,
mind you, I would imagine some of the proceedings weren't worth covering.
So some of the proceedings, some of it's quite boring, for lack of a better word, because it's a lot of just reviewing documents. It's a lot of talking to witnesses that aren't that are experts in, certain kinds of payments and that kind of thing. Because again, this case is really quite. There are two parts of this case. There's the parts of the case that actually matter legally, and then there's the sort of the show, the song and dance that they're sort of having in front of the jury, because the paperwork is the substance, and that's a little bit more in question as to there's Trump signed these checks and they but the question is did he have the intent? Did he know? And that's going to be rely on witness testimony. The only problem is the witness testimony. The most important witness testimony was again from a porn star and a lawyer who was a convicted perjurer, and so that was obviously very that was something the jury really wanted to take note of, and they did. Some of the drier stuff, we'll see if that's enough to get him convicted. But again, I think because you had this one very crucial witness, that sort of flubbed it on the stand. It's going to be very hard to convict. But again, it's a mix of boring days, interesting days, and luckily I was there for one of the interesting days.
Do you not have in the States the facility to what we call make a submission of no case at the end of the prosecution case?
Yes, you can. And the defense did do that. Yes.
Oh, they did make that submission, did they?
Did that submission, yes.
And I can't remember the name of the judge, but he didn't allow that submission.
He allowed the defense to make the case.
Yes, sorry, but he ruled against them.
I don't know if the judge has made a ruling on it yet, actually, because the judge can basically take his time with the decision. It's very unlikely that he would rule in the favor of the defense, because, but the judge can reserve his opinion for like you can make the case, but the judge can reserve his opinion. I haven't heard anything about him dismissing that, although it sounds likely.
Well, I personally would infer that to be the case, Connor, because you may agree that if the defence make a successful submission of no case, the case should be chucked out there and then. It shouldn't be continuing. So that's what would happen. That's what would happen in the UK if a judge upholds, as we call it, a submission of no case to answer, that says, right, the evidence is so weak or tenuous or discredited that there is no way this jury can convict as a matter of law. The case is chucked out there and then. So,
this is where it gets into the weeds in terms of, the high profile nature of the case, the sort of legal theory that's kind of been untested. This is going to be something that should be very hard for the defense to prove. I mean, there are a lot of the prosecution to prove. There are a lot of legal scholars who have commented and said that this case is, again, weak. So I think because essentially they're trying to charge Trump for something that is outside of the statute of limitations. I'm not sure if that exists in the UK, where if you commit a crime and it's been long enough, they can't prosecute you for it. And so this crime is outside of the statute of limitations, but they're bringing it back in by linking it to any other election-related crime, which is in the New York books. And that's, again, a very weak case to prove. And, anyone who's looking at this with a critical eye sort of is skeptical that the prosecution has proved it. Again, because this case is somewhat political, because the judges, for example, in the United States are elected. The judge may not want to do that and may send it to the jury regardless. Even if he personally thinks there is no case, he'll do it for perhaps political reasons, perhaps not. It really depends.
Yes, well, I must confess, that doesn't appeal to me. No pun intended. I think for judges to allow their political motivations to get in the way of what should be the serving up of justice and objective clinical judgments, I think that's a great shame. But there we are.
Mark, would you like to throw a different perspective on this?
No, I'm finding it really interesting. I just wonder whether Connor thinks all of this is really good value for money, and who's going to pay for all this.
Value for who's going to pay for all of this?
Yeah.
I think the question has to be asked, especially in the case of an acquittal. Was it worth the taxpayer money to have Trump come into the city, have him be arraigned, and then have the Secret Service and the police of New York be because this is very resource intensive to have a former be tried. There's a lot of security precautions that they put in place. And again, it raises questions of what New York's prosecutors are doing, because again, our prosecutors are also elected, and there's been a lot of concern that no bail laws and amongst other things are sort of causing the city to be a little unsafe. And so again, there's been some criticism even in New York City, which is a very left-leaning city, that perhaps the prosecution should be focusing a little bit more on on violent crime in the city. So again, there is some general concern, even if people in the city don't like Trump. There is some concern that, again, that because this case was so weak, you know, and if he gets an acquittal, what was all that money spent on?
Yeah,
Looks very critical at that point.
Yeah, I think
my understanding, Connor, is that Trump's own defense expenses are covered by his campaign funds. He gets donations from Republicans, and that's how he affords to defend these cases. Is that right?
Yes. It's a little more complicated because the money that Trump raised starting in 2021 with regards to his sort of legal campaign to try and overturn the election legally, the money that was donated at that time is still being used for his legal funds defending him now.
Right.
Yeah, it's unclear, how much longer that pot of gold is essentially going to last. But Trump has enough money to continue paying his lawyers. But yes, he has used a lot of campaign funds or funds that were donated to him in the past, legal funds that were donated to him in the past, that for this trial. Yes.
I mean, his reputation over here, and it's only what I read, so it could be completely wrong, is that his reputation as a businessman is that he doesn't pay people. He has a track record for not paying people.
So a lot of what Trump's history is not paying people, but when it comes time to pay, Trump likes to sort of renegotiate it and get it down, the cost. And he likes using, for example, other people's money. He said, right, and it may seem somewhat cutthroat, but it is certainly something that people who try to get people who work in the real estate business, especially, are very interested in doing. Right, there's because again, if you ask someone to build a building and you want to deduct certain things, you want to say, hey, you didn't do this job correctly, that obviously you want to save as much money as you can. That's how you build wealth. And so you can't really fault Trump. It's a bit scummy, but you can't really fault Trump for doing it.
No, it's I get you, but it's pretty sharp practice, isn't it?
Yes, that's how New York is. It's how New York has been. When it comes to paying his lawyers for these criminal trials, he's been pretty good about it. Mostly because I think he genuinely wants to avoid jail, and he's smart enough not to try to renegotiate with his lawyers on that. Because if you try to fuck with your lawyers, essentially, they will. There's a question of how well they're going to represent you, and
exactly, yeah. Now, firstly, your assessment of the outcome of the case, based on the porn star and the perjurous main witness, I think that case is holed beneath the waterline. He's going to get off, isn't he?
That's a good question. I think so. A lot of other people think so. I don't see it being a conviction. It could be a mistrial. You could have a couple of holdouts.
Yeah.
The only way I see it being a conviction is if every member of that jury, for political reasons, decides to say, I don't like Donald Trump, the evidence, I think Michael Cohen's lying, but I don't like Trump, and so I'm going to vote to convict, and it's not an unreasonable opinion, because, Manhattan, where Trump is being tried, went for Joe Biden 87%, so it isn't an unreasonable conclusion to draw, although I think it's unlikely.
Trump Towers, is that in Manhattan?
Trump has a number of properties in Manhattan. He has one near Columbus Circle, and then one a little bit closer to where I work.
Right.
So yes, Trump Tower. He has two towers that I know of in New York.
Right, one more question, Philip. One more question from you. One more question from Mark, and then I'll pop in a last one. We have to open the pub. So, Philip?
Yeah, mine's more of a point of information. Connor asked whether we had a statute of limitations in this country. Criminal cases, no. There are certain time limits for very minor matters, what we call summary offences, what you would call, I think, misdemeanors. For felonies, there is no statute of limitations. There is in civil proceedings, contract, tort, and that sort of stuff, 3 years, 6 years, 10 years, but not with criminal. The only limitation I know of is for murder, first degree murder, homicide, as you would call it. If the victim does not die within a year and a day of the thing that began the death, then he or she cannot be prosecuted. So the victim has got to die within a year and a day of the incident that the prosecution rely on, which is barking. I saw the expression on your face, Connor. It's barking mad, isn't it?
Mark?
For a long period of time, like say you're poisoned for 2 years slowly with arsenic, wouldn't that be?
Precisely.
Mine's a quick one. Colin, do you think
I just thank you for coming on? It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, Mark, a question?
Yeah, I found it really interesting, Colin. Thanks ever so much for coming on. Just one final thing. Do you think that this whole case?
You're frozen.
Because it's really brought Trump to the fore. Do you think that's actually going to help his presidential election campaign?
Well, I would say for any other candidate, this would be a death sentence. But for Trump, based on the election polling, he's actually done a lot better after all of these indictments were made and all of these cases have been made. I don't know if there's a conviction that might change. It might worsen his numbers, but at this point, we really don't know. It could help him. So I think actually, if anything, it's helping him. Yeah.
Right. Thanks.
Right.
Really
my question is, Connor, my question is, before we go, is the judge seen as totally impartial?
That's a good question. The judge, he seemed fairly calm from my understanding, but during one of the days, he had sort of exploded at a witness, that pro-Trump witness. So some people are saying no, some people are saying yes. I would say that the judge is not entirely impartial, sadly. I think
right. Is that the impression that the general public are getting?
I feel like yes. I feel like that they're getting he might be a bit biased. He might be sustaining too many prosecution motions. He might be a little bit too forward with the prosecution in terms of the jury instructions, that kind of thing. So I think that is the general understanding, is that the judge might not be entirely fair.
Right. So it may well work in Trump's favor.
Politically, yes. Right. Politically.
Connor, thank you. It's been very insightful. And you and Philip chatting about the niceties of law have been very enlightening. And the two laymen, Mark and myself, hopefully have sort of asked evocative questions that aren't that legal. So thank you for taking the time, getting up, sharing your expertise. You are your mother's son, a very good journalist, and we thank you for being with us.
All right. Thank you for having me on.
Connor, I've got one request. When you're a Top Gun, which you're going to be, can you fly to the UK and waggle your wings above my house, please?
Yeah, and above mine in Stoke. Up here, Duck.
Also, request to have a temporary duty assignment in England if I can.
Excellent.
Well, that would be great.
Yeah.
Good luck with it all, Connor.
Thank you.
Yeah, well done, Colin. Good luck,
Thanks
mate.
again.
All right.
Well, we will be back on Tuesday with hopefully the cast of characters from normally Monday, which is a holiday. So Tuesday will be a very full day for us, a very interesting day. And on top of that, Kit Wood will be with us. So do tune in on Tuesday from 8 o'clock in the morning. But until then, we are going to take, I'm going to say, a well-deserved holiday. We are here for you, good, bad, or indifferent, and sometimes it's a bit indifferent, every morning at 8 o'clock or thereabouts. And we spend at least 2 hours with you, sometimes 3, and sometimes even 3.5. So let's say to the pip, and we'll see you on Tuesday. Let's bye.